zelf verkeerd.
Where is it broadcast?
It's a link on YouTube. It's a live stream. So you can see it on YouTube. Maar eigenlijk kan ik jou nog maar iets helpen, of ga ik jij nog vragen, maar dan moet het misschien wel eventjes zeggen.
You've been to one before?
Yeah, I did that.
Ah ja, de iPad is...
Even the European month is one.
Oh yeah. Frederick.
Yeah. And the military wasn't so long before you came up, so you could have even already arrived.
Yeah.
That's the military.
Is that exciting?
The military is was on my country, so for me
Oh, yeah.
it's exciting. Performance-based financing.
Just psychologically preparing for yours.
So how is closer?
Yesterday was the practice. Yeah.
No, yesterday was a practice for conference. not for a job.
That in Oxford.
I hope so. If it gets accepted.
I haven't accepted you.
I'll get a feedback in January.
You are on form, is what we say. If someone is doing well, you say you're on form.
Yeah.
It's a football term. Ferguson knows this. I would say you're on form. You were in the US last year, you were in the UK, you were in South Africa, in the space of like less than a year.
I will really feel on form if I get some of my papers published.
Yeah. How many years are you in again?
Starting my third year.
Okay.
Yeah, but Sahawal, before debating involvement, I hosted a professor from our keynote speaker is a professor from Potsdam.
Okay.
For him, he was telling us that they gave up on the persuasions of publishers, and then taking long time, especially the better the journal, the longer they will take it. So for them, what they do at the university is that there's a professor who's a supervisor, and then they get another at the level of the professor who look at your paper, and then the conclusion that is publishable. Then you continue to your next paper.
Yeah, sure.
So then he told me something that was interesting, that they've had these debates in their organization whereby that how about a professor, a scenario where a professor, your professors say the paper is good to go, and then you send it to publishers, and it's rejected. You go with the one of the professors. If it is also the other way around, that your professors say no, but publishers accept it, still it is the one of the professors. You're telling me how they do it in Potsdam, and I thought it was.
Yeah, it really depends on the university. Like, if I would only follow the requirement of Faculty of Economics here, I could scale up my activity. But I'm looking to kind of one of the criteria, one publication in an A or B.
A or B.
Impact factors, do you know the
Yes.
Okay. So the first quantile of June is the A June.
Want ze heeft de vraag wel doorgestuurd, in het slechtste geval wordt de vraag hier. Kom maar wel van achter zetten.
But I think here the A or B. Okay.
You have to have an A ranked.
A or B.
A or B. What? At least one.
At least. I'm currently in the process.
Ja, ik kan mij eigenlijk niet uitlaten.
Economics journal.
Yeah. One with population economics, and another one with world development.
What do they do some qualitative as well, don't they?
Yeah, world development is kind of linked They have both quantitative papers and qualitative.
Ja.
So that's something that they want to
Ja, nu horen we jou. Hallo. Hallo. Hoort jullie mij? Ja.
Peter.
Ja, dat is goed. Ik ga misschien wel jouw micro, jouw geluid even dempen tot na de presentatie.
Oké, prima.
Is dat goed?
Prima, ik zal hem hier ook op mute zetten dan.
Ah ja, oké. Wel, als jij dat dan doet en dan daarna terug unmute, dan... Dus nu is Christina een presentatie op het scherm en straks kom jij dan op het scherm voor de vragen. Is dat goed? Of heb jij dat liever niet? Of als jij liever gewoon hier op het computerscherm, dan is dat ook goed, hè?
Misschien gewoon op de computer.
Oké, dan kan Christina jou zien, maar de rest van mensen die hier zitten kunnen jou niet zien. Oké. Dan laten we het gewoon zoals dat nu is en dan ga jij volgen en dan kan als jij even opnieuw zet als je de presentatie en dan ga je daarna. Goed?
Het ziet er een beetje in de avond uit.
Ja, Nathalie had er iets van verteld, inderdaad. Dus, voilà.
Zo is Christina.
Voilà.
Marie. Oh, I'm very sorry I could not attend, but this way I can still.
Yeah, sorry for that. I'm glad I can take here now. Yeah. Thank you.
And that's very
So it's back again. Anyway, let's see for us the best we just go for.
Sociale kortsenior. Was echt
Maar ook maar erbij.
Yeah, this is like one of the only time people actually talk about your PhD and I've read it completely, so I should really enjoy it. Let me give that to yeah, okay. Can we take a picture together? Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh. Yeah, was it here the lights? Yeah, but it's okay. It's okay. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, thank you. Shall I join the yes, please.
Isn't that? I've been feeling ill all week.
We were yesterday.
I'm just starting to feel a bit better today. Sleeping in work is
The only sensible thing to do.
yeah, it's pretty slow. I was the
All right, it was maybe we started a new song. We started our recording.
Can I take a picture?
Thank you.
Come on.
Oh, good.
I think we're getting somewhere.
Yes.
And there's new, there are 2 new members. And who are actually asked for a song. So they're actually in my
Oh, really?
And they it's not a sitar because that's Indian.
Musical refugees.
Yeah, it's very strange.
And the moment you start like
People say,
I reached Angola to get that to that side down where there is combat, and yeah, the body has already gained.
So, dear colleagues, friends, and family of Christina, today we are gathered here for the public defense of Miss Christina Shitiima. Miss Shitiima will defend her doctoral thesis titled An Analysis of Household Development Strategies and Their Linkage to River Basin Resources Degradation in Tanzania. My name is Marieke Porta. I'm an associate professor at the IOB, and I will be the chair of this public defense today. So I'm in charge of the program. Let me quickly guide you through this program. First, Ms. Shitiima will present her work. She will do this within the time limit of 30 minutes. Next, I will introduce the jury members, after which some of them will be allowed to shortly assess Christina's work and raise some questions or issues of concern to which Christina is supposed to react. During this part of the defense, the supervisors must remain silent. When the jury members have spoken, I will inquire if anyone in the public still has a question for Christina. And after that, the jury will withdraw for deliberation. And then finally, the jury will reveal its decision. And if all goes well, an laudatio, or maybe two this time, will take place. So now I would first like to invite Christina to take the floor and explain her research in 30 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Marie. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to welcome you to my PhD Public Defense. The title of my work is Analysis of Household Development Strategies and their linkage to river basin resources degradation in Tanzania. I've been doing this research for the past 4 years, and now I'm going to present it to you in 20 minutes, not more than that. So my work is organized in 5 areas, mainly introduction, theoretical framework, methodology, findings, and finally conclusion. I'm going to start with the introduction. I think some of you must be wondering that why I was researching resources. Maybe why not a specific resource like water. Basically, this work emanated from the concept of the governance of water resources. But, and we both know that water resources, in this case the fresh water, is a basic natural resource which sustains life and provides for various social and economic needs. But the world in general has experienced the deterioration in water resource in terms of both quality and quantity. Several studies have shown that. And there are several reasons for the causes of this dispute. For example, unreliable rainfall, multiplicity of competing users, and the degradation of sources and catchment areas. This deterioration has resulted into several, I can call them challenges, like it threatens food security, it also threatens environmental integrity, but it also causes water use conflicts between different sectors in the economy and also between different water users. But why river basin resources now? In literature, water resources probably related to the failure of the water governance system rather than the physical water condition. And the literature also suggests that as an entity, the river basin is an important feature for the development of water resources. Why? Because other resources at the basin areas also affect the condition of water. Things like soil condition, forest vegetation, etc., etc. So we say that as an entity, river basin integrates river basin natural environment, socio-economic in which the water, the basin is located, and also political context. So it's, something that is more important in your study is socio-economic policies in which also together with the norms on the users of resources are likely to affect the river basin's natural environment. So before I proceed to the nature of the problem in Tanzania, I would first like to define some 2 important terms that are largely used in this study. First, river basin resource. These are river basin natural resources which are used for different development strategies, or I can say economic activities. For example, water that is used for irrigation or for the fishing activities, areas for livestock keeping, 3 for the construction of houses, source of energy, etc., etc. And the development strategies are livelihood strategies or economic activities that are pursued with the aim of improving the livelihood of people, meaning that people use river basin resources, for example, water for irrigation, to pursue these economic activities with the aim of improving their livelihood. So in rural areas, activities may include employment. Now, the nature of the problem in Tanzania, like many other countries in the world, Tanzania is also facing the problem of natural resource degradation, including river basin, due to the competition among the users of those resources. And this competition is basically contained within like 4 areas: that water that is used for domestic purpose, for industrial purpose, hydroelectric power production, also water for other economic activities. But when you look at the problem at the household level, when they use river basin resources, their decision to use those resources are driven by their aspiration to improve their livelihood and nothing else. So in this study, we engage with the debate on the links between the livelihood of rural people and the degradation of river basin resources. In short, we analyze the relationship between households' use of river basin resources, the choices of their development strategies, and degradation of those resources. My study is guided by 4 questions. Question 1 was on the governance structure, that how do existing governance structures affect people's use of river basin resources. Question number 2 was on the access to resources, that how do different groups of people within and between society access resources, and how does the access to resource affect their choice of development strategies. Question number 3, are the development strategies that individuals choose and the river basin degradation interlinked, and if so, in what way? Question number 4, is the awareness of river basin degradation linked to environmental behavior, and if so, in what way? The second part of my presentation is on the theoretical framework. Actually, I review different theories, but I use livelihood framework as the major analytical tool. Livelihood framework is an illustrative tool that recognizes people's use of resources, people use of different resources, also including natural resources, to enhance their livelihood. If you look at the framework itself, here we have livelihood assets, that people use assets to pursue these development strategies, but at the end of the day, when they undertake this activity, the outcomes can be maybe improvement in their livelihood, like I said, but they can also be an outcome on the status of the natural resources, like degradation or the development of the resources. The livelihood in general is affected by the vulnerability context, as shown by this box. These are things that are beyond the household control. Things like changing weather, for example, flood, can destroy the asset, which can also affect the livelihood strategies, but can also lead to the negative livelihood outcome. But on the other hand, also we have institutional context. These are also beyond the household control. Things like rules, regulations, infrastructures, principles of markets, can determine the way people use the resources. Also, they determine the activities that are pursued by people. They can also affect livelihood outcome. This is just like a brief of the livelihood framework, but the framework has been criticized. One of the criticisms is the failure to conceptualize the issue of access to resources. Another criticism is that it limits itself to the economic indicators of well-being or the outcome as the main measures of livelihood outcomes. It also criticized for insufficiently consideration of the impact of social relation issues on livelihood outcome. So after addressing the criticism, I came out with my own vision or my own analytical framework. it looks like this. And if I'll go brief in that framework, to address the criticism of the failure to include the concept of access to resource, now access to resource has been redefined to include not only the possession of goods, but also rights or norms on the use of resources and the benefits that people can accrue from the resources. Which is influenced by difference in informal social relations and have used several theories, for example, theories of access to redefine access to resource. I've used the concept of the critical institutionalism in the theory of the development of natural resources to include the concept of the difference in informal social relations. But also, the original framework, I considered that households are owned at the household level. I mean, not household, sorry. Assets or resources are owned at the household level. So I went further and used the inter-household theory to assume that even if assets are owned at the household level, that different members of the household can access the resources differently. I've also used intersectionality theory. Then on the choice of PhD, we have also assumed that it is influenced by difference in informal social relations. And these activities that people choose, they can be environmental friends or non-environmental friends. And for example, if they're an environmental friend, the result will be river-based resource degradation. But we have also said that degradation is not only caused by the choice of DST, but also by environmental behavior, which is, in this case, is measured by the use of the conservation methods when people are carrying out those activities. These behavior are influenced by environmental awareness, economic factors, and also difference in informal social relations. We have also applied consequentialism and intersectionality theory. So this is a brief about my analytical framework. Then now I go to the research methodology. The study was conducted to the households that reside at Kilombero River Basin and Simiyu River Basin in Tanzania. Kilombero River Basin is a subbasin of Rufiji and is located at the eastern side of Tanzania, here highlighted by the green color. And Simiyu River Basin is located as the northern part of Tanzania, highlighted by the red color, and is one of the rivers that feed Lake Victoria, one of the 6 rivers in Tanzania that feed Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria is shared by 3 countries, Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. So from those basins, we started 5 villages in Kilombero district, which is in Kilombero Basin, and in Simiyu Basin, we started 4 villages located in Meatu district. The second part of the research methodology is about the study approach. The mixed method approach was used to collect data into 3 phases in sequential manner. During the first phase, we conducted exploratory qualitative research, whereby we collected prior information to aid the selection of the studied districts and villages, but also to clarify some of the variables that were used in the analytical framework, like the concept of river-based resource. We could not define it before going to the study area. During the second phase, we used the quantitative research approach, whereby the household survey was conducted by using the questionnaire was the major tools of conducting the survey. And we collected intra-household data, meaning that the data from the different members of the household. And these data were used to test the relations in the analytical framework and to get initial answers to the research question. The third phase, which was also a qualitative method, we conducted focus group discussions, and the data from focus group discussion helped us to get in-depth information on the relationship between variables and also to interpret our results correctly. Now, going to the findings. Question 1 was about the existing government structures and the way they affect people use of river basin resources. Basically, I used document review to analyze, to get this information. So I reviewed the water policies from the period after independence until now. So the current water policy was adopted in 2002, and this policy has moved to the country or the government system from the centralized system where the government was responsible for the management of river basin to a more participatory approach where different stakeholders now are involved in the planning and management. And now inland water are managed according to river basins, and we have 9 river basins. The policy has its strengths. For example, community now participate in governance of river basins through these are the groups of, for example, groups of irrigators or livestock keepers. They form their group. They collectively they can get permit to use water, and they also have their representative at the different levels of management. And for example, under representation of smallholder resource users, that the policy tends to attract large-scale users and corporate, private and small-scale users. So as a result, the majority of the smallholder water users are still unregistered, which also means that they do not have the permit to use water resources. Question 2 was about the access to resource. If you could remember, I don't know, access to resource, ability to benefit. So on the concept of the right to use, which is equivalent to our first iteration here on the analytical framework, research shows that women are less likely to have rights to fish and rights to pasture. Something that maybe I should explain. When I mean right, it's not legal rights. It's like the norms, the practical rights. So women are less likely to have rights to fish, women are less likely to have rights to pasture. And during FTD, we found out that in fishing community, fishing is really a major activity. According to them, it's scarce for women to visit fishing camps. But in the agro-pastoralist communities, people belong to men. That's no, I mean, their norms do not allow women holding for assets such as land and cattle. Relation 2, which was on the ability of the resources, have been to social identity factors and inter-household differences. We found out that women are less likely to benefit from this. They already benefit here on the goods in the house. So we have that freedom. However, the results are not homogeneous across all women groups, which is in line with our intersectionality theory. We found diversities between cultures, that women in fishing community are more likely to benefit comparing to women in agro-pastoral community. But also diversities within cultures, that in fishing community, even if women are more likely to benefit, it is older married women who are more likely to benefit compared to young married women. When it comes to the intra-household differences, we found out that spouses, children, and relatives are likely to benefit compared to the heads of households. And during our research, we found out that most of the heads of households are men, automatically are women. Intersectionality found out that married children are more likely to benefit. In the agro-pastoral community, the decision on the use of household goods is reserved to the main head of the household. Now, relation 3 and 4 about the choice of development strategies, regradation. We found, just of all, we grouped our results into major development strategies and secondary development strategies. By major development strategy means that I can say the primary, the things that people depend on their livelihood, the activities, sorry. And we found out that neither informal social relation factors nor access to livelihood resources affect the activities. However, the same factors that do not affect the major activities affect the secondary ones. Thus, gender and access to livelihood resource affect the choice of activities. And we also found out that access to social and financial capitals result to the choice of environmental friendly development strategies, which also have implication on the conservation of resources. The last question was about the conservation behavior, and the result shows that women are less likely to use conservation methods in Kilombero. Also, economic factors increase the likelihood to use conservation methods regardless of the gender of the respondent in most areas. Also, degradation awareness increases the likelihood to use conservation in that. Now, the last part for conclusion. First, contribution to the literature. The study has contributed to the literature by managing to distinguish between practical resource and benefit in creating only on the possession of the intra-household analysis. The study has collected data from different members of household. It means that you have moved beyond from this on household data or the data that includes only having the wives. On the intersection, we found out that men and women are heterogeneous group in society. Natural resources, sense of policy, and the degradation awareness alone are not sufficient factors for people to conserve natural resources. Policy recommendation to improve access to river basin to different groups of people. We think that there is a need to design strategies that include the majority of smallholder resource users in the implementation framework of existing water policy. However, this should not be only the government effort, maybe we need efforts from other practitioners like private sectors, NGO to help in the implementation of the policy. Of river basin resources, different management options are needed to suit the area-specific needs that these resources problem are not. I mean, they differ between study areas, so even the option can differ between areas. So in addition to rules and regulations, also incentives that encourage resource users to diversify their activities and to practice for environmental behavior are important. Last slide, I think, area for future research. Our study has collected what we called cross-sectional data. So we didn't look at the dynamic nature of the things like information relations. So we recommend that maybe future study may look at the process of social trajectories for which power relations differ between people. Also, ethnographic research methods can be used to get detailed understanding, especially of the people intersection of different social categories. On the government of river basin resources, there are current studies that we have seen now that report that social networks to be effective in conservation of natural resources. So we recommend that maybe future studies can also use this methodology of social network analysis to see its impact on the governance of river basin resources. And on the livelihood outcomes, since we studied 2 areas with different cultures, but also people from one area have migrated from Simiyu to Kilombero, then also future studies maybe can study livelihood outcomes of agro-pastoralists who have migrated to Kilombero, whether be people who are left at the areas of origin. We have also studied the impact of marital status and some society practice both polygamy and monogamy. So also women in different types of marriages can be studied, or different categories of women in marriage, because we saw that the outcome differ between being the first wife, the second, or the young wife. They have very different outcomes. So future study also can consider studying that. And thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you, Christina, for summarizing your work. It's not easy to summarize 4 years of research in 30 minutes, but everything is relative. So this may have been a relatively easy part of the defense. because your jury members are getting ready for the relatively difficult part, which is the asking of questions. So may I invite the jury members to take place in the seats which are behind their name tags. I have to mention that one of our jury members will be participating through Skype, but I think she will only be projected on the screen when it's her time to ask questions. So let me present the jury members. Christina had the luxury of working with two supervisors. Her local supervisor at Nzumbe University has been Dr. Hermanus Di Mosso. Dr. Di Mosso has obtained a PhD in economics at Wageningen University. His areas of academic research include environmental and natural resource economics, agricultural economics, and public sector economics. And Dr. Di Mosso is currently actively engaged in teaching and supervising master and PhD students at Nzumbe University. The second supervisor is Nathalie Holvoet, who is a full-time professor at the IOB, University of Antwerp. Professor Holvoet has a long track record of academic teaching, research and policy advisory work in the area of monitoring and evaluation and gender and development. Current research and evaluation projects of Professor Holvoet more specifically focus on community-based monitoring, the use and influence of monitoring and evaluation, intra-household decision-making and climate change, as well as cash transfers. And then the jury includes three jury members who will ask questions. Unfortunately, Marijke Daze cannot be present here because she underwent surgery this morning, but she will nevertheless ask some questions through Skype. Marijke Daze is a professor in rural development economics at the Department of Agricultural Economics of Ghent University. With her research team, she studies how agricultural activities could be improved for farmers and farm workers in the Global South. And her research takes a microeconomic approach with a focus on institutional changes such as market access or cooperative membership. She teaches on development economics and agricultural development. Then from the same university, Ghent University, we also have Professor Koen Stoeken, who is an associate professor in Africanist anthropology. Professor Stoeken did his ethnographic fieldwork mostly in northern Tanzania. He authored several peer-reviewed volumes, the recent one entitled Medicinal Role, which rethinks kingship in Central and Eastern Africa. He also co-founded the Center for Anthropological Research on Effect and Materiality and coordinates since 2012 an academic exchange with Nzumbe University. Then finally we have Joachim de Weer, who is a senior lecturer at the IOB and a senior research fellow at LICOS, which is part of the KU Leuven. Joachim uses economics to improve our understanding of the lives of the poor in low-income countries. He also draws inspiration work outside of economics and makers and practitioners who fight poverty. Most of his research is based on data he collected himself, and in recent years, his research focus has been on urbanization, informal insurance, social networks, early childhood development, and the measurement through surveys. So I would now like to invite first Marijke Daze to ask her questions to Christina.
Hello? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, super. Hello. Hello, Christina. Do you see me and hear me?
Yes, I can see you.
Yeah.
I can hear you.
it's a bit unfortunate that I'm not able to travel to Antwerp. It's supposed to be small surgery this morning, turned out to be a little bit bigger and more severe, so I wasn't able to travel. Very sorry for that. I wanted to be with you physically also, but through Skype it worked well. Thank you very much for your presentation. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to read your work. It's very, very interesting. And I congratulate you, especially with the way that research. You have a very thorough conceptual framework, which is then translated into your research, and that is very well done.
Thank you.
I was also asked to ask you a few questions. I still have a few points that I would like your reaction upon.
Okay.
First, it's perhaps a more general question. You start your introduction of your work with referring to a vicious circle between poverty, livelihood choices, and natural resource degradation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And you mentioned that we need a better understanding of these interlinks between access, use of natural resources, and the exposure of this degradation. Yet a bit further down the analysis, not much is being said anymore about poverty. You analyze the different impacts and you assume gender and development strategies are linked to poverty, but this assumption is a bit, to me, a bit more implicit than it is really studied. Can you perhaps elaborate a bit on that?
Okay. Actually, like you said, I was looking at the access to resources, that the way people use resources, the activities, because we assume that people use resources on different development activities, but as a result, there are different outcomes, which can be environmental friendly, which can have impact also on natural resources. So the link is first on the access, that how do they access those resources? Meaning that, the access can be influenced by their norms on the use, that like their informal rules, I can say, that, for example, people are supposed to use the resource in this way, or this group of people can use this can be used maybe for recreational, this for the irrigation, this is what, all those have impact on the outcomes of the natural resources, but they can also be affected by the formal rules, which I didn't go into detail of that, other than looking at the policy impact on different groups of people, the way they access resources, and maybe the outcomes. Yeah, when it comes to the activities, I have the choice of activities, meaning that the activities that people normally do in their lives, which can be environmental friendly or non-environmental friendly. But I also think one of the contributions that we have added is that it's not only the choice of activity, but it's the way also they use those activities. Because the person, for example, who irrigates at the place with the well-formulated modern irrigation scheme, even if the person uses the water resource, we don't expect him or her to have negative impact on the environment compared to the person, for example, who cultivating along the river. And those are the majority because they don't have the water rights, maybe, to be in the groups of the irrigators association, the option that they have is to cultivate or to feed and water their cattle along the river. So even if both irrigate, the ones that use modern irrigation and the one who cultivates along the river, but the outcomes are really different because of the methods that they are using. I'm not sure if I've been able to answer your question.
Well, I was thinking more about the relationship with poverty alleviation.
Okay.
For example, in your your study on the secondary activities,
yes.
You say, okay, it's quite important that people would engage more in off-farm activities, and that for that also social and financial inclusion are important.
Yeah.
But then you assume that this off-farm income will also take them out of poverty, no? So you assume that the outcome, the financial outcome or the economic outcome is better. Because you're not actually referring to much income parameters in your analysis.
Yes, okay, let me start with second of it. The second one, I didn't include the income parameters because actually I collected data at the household level, but the level, but within the household, I collected data from different household members. And in rural areas, not only assumption, but in rural areas, these resources are pulled and are used by all household members for the production activities, and even the goods that are produced from those resources are pulled, are used for the household consumption. Maybe some of them are brought to the market. So it's really different during the level analysis to say that, okay, within these 100 bags of maize that were produced within this household, that maybe 5 belongs to the head of the household and the rest belong to this and this. It was really difficult to break out those data according to individual level. But the second one was
it's related.
That's the reason that I did not include the income. Yeah, that is the reason that. But if the analysis could have been done at the household level, then it could have been possible to calculate the annual or monthly income, and to look at the impact of income on other factors like the activities or the status of environment. Also, you talk about the relationship between financial capital and social capital with the degradation and the poverty. Yes, it has impact because from the analysis we found out that people with access to financial and social capital are more likely to use the environmental friendly activities which have positive impact on the natural resources, but this is those are kind of capital that are not easily available to everyone, it's particularly financial capital.
Okay. Yeah. Do I have time for another question?
Yes, so you can ask all of your questions in this first round.
Okay, yeah. So a few shorter questions then also.
Okay.
A bit related to what I was just mentioning.
Yes.
Also in your first empirical chapter, where you look at these different policies, you're speaking about these resource user groups, right?
Yes.
And you're also mentioning there that the poorer households, the poorer households farmers are excluded or marginalized in these user groups.
Yes.
So you have the aspect of inequality also there, and the aspect of poverty also in that sense, in their contribution or their possibility to be involved in these user groups.
Yeah.
Yet in the end, I didn't see in your final chapter,
yeah,
what type of policies could be done to create more inclusive user groups. So could these groups be empowered? How could these poorer farmers and poorer households also be included in these user groups? Could there be a role for NGOs or leadership or governments in there, or is that something that will come over time?
Okay. Yes, I talked about the resource user groups, and I said that majority of them are not included in the implementation of the policy. And in my final chapter, I think I recommend on the role of the government to strategize on the ways to include these small users into this group in the implementation policy. But I think it's not only the role of the government, even if it's the role of the government, but there is a government at different level. Central government and the local government, which really local government is the one that implemented the policy, not the central government. And I think I propose something that this resource program are really not similar across the, across the areas. So if I have to talk about the role of the government, maybe now at the grassroots level, at the implementation level of the policy, which are at the building level, is the place that they should come with the strategies considering the problem that they face on how to come or to involve more people in the implementation framework. but it's not only the role of the government, but I think other practitioners or other stakeholders that work with the natural resources program, like NGOs, CBOs, also they have a role. Because the police is there, and to be frankly, I don't see big problem with the police, but only implementation. So after having the police, also other practitioners can try to mobilize them and maybe to support them. Because for example, in Kilombero, some people claim that they have funds at the modern irrigation scheme, but they cannot conduct their activities within the scheme because they lack things like access, funds to purchase improved seeds, fertilizer, which when you operate within the scheme, you must purchase those inputs within the tank. So for them, we sometimes start, we need people who can facilitate them, or maybe who can support them to have access to other things that are needed in the implementation of the policy.
Okay. Thank you. I think I used my time, I think.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay, thank you, Professor Dawson.
Thank you.
And may I now invite Professor Stukanen to raise his questions and comments.
All right, thank you so much. Dear Christina,
Yes.
let me share this with you and with the whole audience, that your thesis is an impressive, well-written piece of work with a solid theoretical foundation, linking some theories that most theses would find very challenging, such as critical institutionalism, intersectionality, and both the intra-household and allocation analysis. Quite impressive and daring of you. And also congratulations on your well-structured and insightful presentation. So now my critical questions. I must tell you in advance that these questions you have not dealt with before. So sometimes during we have seen each other at some stages to discuss your research, and sometimes we discussed things and we discovered both that you cannot study everything. But I have still 4 questions remaining, which were also not treated during the public defense. So you can see which ones you can answer and how you want to answer. You're very free, so there's no guarantee that you can answer each of them. The first one is about the relationship between households' uses of RBR and choices of development, so strategies, so DST. Did you find linkages typical of Tanzania? So if you think of that connection there, and if so, which insights of yours in your research you would consider rather typical of Tanzania? Could be the country, could be the region, and why? Why would you then say that this is characteristic linkage, characteristic to the region or to the country?
Thank you, Professor Paul. Yes, I think there is linkage between household use of resources and not really household, because I really didn't look at typical household level, I look at individual level. Yeah, even if the activities are practiced at the household level, but within the household, not all members have access to all resources or access to all types of activities that are conducted within that particular household. Yeah, there is a link that, for example, I think I have already mentioned that. For example, people who have access to this social financial capital have also access to multiple activities. Actually, majority from my data, I found that majority practice seasonal agriculture that depends on rainfall. That is the activity that I can say that is available to everybody, regardless of the gender, age, or any other factor. That everybody have access to agriculture. And I think the reason is because the goods that are produced from agriculture are used for household consumption. So if people do not practice agriculture, they are not going to have goods. But when we go to other activities now that are not intended to to feed the family, or I mean the products to be with the family that are intended maybe to generate income. That's where you get differences between the member. It can be between the household member, but even within the society. That typically maybe, for example, one of the interesting findings that, like I said, that women don't have rights to fish, but it's not that women cannot fish at all, it's the level of fishing. If it's fishing for the household purpose, then they fish at the areas that are near to their household. But if it's fishing for the income generation, then they do not fish.
Can I continue? So if you now look more at the comparative level, you have data from Quilombero region and from Meato.
Yes.
If you compare those two areas,
Yes.
can you say that linkages are regionally based, so can be characteristic to a certain region? That Meato is more tending towards, let's say, a positive correlation, and while on the same linkage you would find a negative correlation. Just give me an example in Quilombero.
I think the linkages are typical, more or less the same. Is that the only difference that I see? I think it's only the cultural norms, because in both study areas I found that women are really not involved in income generation activities. The only difference that here they're not involved in fishing, there they're not involved maybe in livestock keeping. But the result are the same with the cultural norms. And for example, in Quilombero, I found out that okay, even if women are not involved in fishing, but women in Quilombero, some women, not all of them, they benefit more from the goods that are produced from the agriculture. Okay, but they not benefit because they're women, no, because the husband are not there to control the products, because every day they are the fishing comes fishing. But I think if they would be there, maybe the situation could have been different. I don't know. That's just something like that.
Thank you. It was an open question. I'm satisfied. So you talk about cultural norms now, so I want to continue with that.
Okay.
I think you approach cultural norms mostly as independent, as an independent variable. I know what you think about that. So, and most of all, I wonder about cultural norms as a dependent variable, as what could they be an effect of? So which causes could cultural norms be an effect? How, in function of what independent variable, other independent variable, could cultural norms vary according to you? Do you have data on this in your thesis?
I don't have data on the, determinants of the cultural norms. And I cannot say that, of course, I cannot say that I've treated them like independent variables. They are not really independent variables. They are things that they have been there for a long time, but their changes also depend on the actors in the society. For example, culture like benefit, for example, a particular group of people in the society. I mean, the norm, not culture, sorry, the norm that benefits a particular group of people in the society. If it really favors them, and maybe if those people have the power to influence the change of the culture, they are less likely to come with any effort to change the culture because they're the one who benefit. So they are really not independent. That can be changed, but it depends who has the influence on the changing of the norms.
Yes, thank you. So I wanted to add that you actually have, like you just did now, you have actually examples where cultural norms are dependent variables, like when you say that well, at least you find it somewhere when you discover that norms of immigrants in Kuma might be more strict than back home. So that migration could be one element that makes the cultural norms more strict.
Yes, migration can be the factor, especially for the agro-pastoralists. When I compare the way they live at their areas of origin, for example, in Simuyu, comparing to those who have moved to Quilombero, there are some changes in the norms. Yeah.
And I invite you to think about this more later. It's not just a remark, not a question now. that, you know, when you said the findings, your findings imply that women cannot be considered a homogeneous group and not even in a single community. That implies that there are elements that cause create likeness of certain norms more than other norms, depending on a certain category of women. Like, I think that if they're not homogeneous, that I can imagine that there must be some linkage there as well, some kind of association with cultural norms and strictness of following them, those norms. This was just a remark, so thank you. I still have a small question when I'm looking at the chair.
It's a small question.
It's a small question. Because it's a small question where you can choose to be very elaborate or not. What is social class in Tanzania? That's my question. I must say I've never heard a good answer to that. So yeah, I'm thinking about the river-based river basin residences. People who live close, might be that people living near to the river actually have more resources and thus belong to a richer group, a wealthier group, which then also goes together with different norms about environmental management. My question.
I agree, but at the same time, I also disagree. I collected data of the people who live along the river basin area, or I can say that in the river basin in Tanzania, but it doesn't mean that I specifically collected the data from people, for example, who have land that is along the river basin. I think you know in Tanzania, our villages that we don't live, I mean, our villages, the way they were formulated, people don't live at the area where they practice the economic activities. We have like residential area, but people always not travel, walk maybe to the farming areas and go back to their residential areas. So I collected data at the village level and they included respondents. Some of them have land along the river, but some of them really do not possess land along the river. But it doesn't mean that they don't have access to that land because they can even rent and use land for their activities. So saying that they are all richer people, no, I think it's more a diverse group. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let us now move to the last jury member who will ask questions. Professor De Licht, you have the floor.
Thank you, Christina. I want to, in addition to the good things that my fellow jury members have said about the manuscript and about your presentation, I also want to commend you on the changes you made since the pre-defense. I think you've incorporated very nicely all the suggestions and comments, and I know it was quite a big chunk to deal with, and I think you've done it very well.
Thank you.
In terms of questions, let me start with two questions, and then perhaps if the chair will allow us a second round, I'll ask a third one. The first question is that in your quantitative analysis, you rely very much on responses that have been made, that people have given to you, right? And there are questions like, are you able to use this resource, or are you able to benefit from the income you gain from this resource, etc. And in your qualitative work, you actually demonstrate that these gender norms, they might be, they're like a little layer of paint, but you can scratch underneath and see some very different picture. And you give a really nice example in your thesis about a woman who says, I'm not allowed to buy new clothes for my husband, but what I do is I buy new clothes, I give them to my friend, she wears them for a week, then we wash them, and then I put them on. And my husband never knows that I bought new clothes. So my question is, like, considering that there are all these ways in which people and think about like the gender results, and all these ways in which women, for example, circumnavigate these norms, do you think that then also that influences your quantitative results in the sense that maybe they've given you the right norm, the answers they've given you were more the answers that society expects of them? And well, actually, perhaps things are a little bit different. And if so, my question is twofold. Like, first, do you think that that's a possibility, that that the responses to the quantitative survey have been influenced by that? And secondly, if so, what do you expect that to imply for the results of your analysis?
Okay, thank you for the question. During the survey, yes, I collected those information about the norms on the use, if people can use the resources, the activities they do, and if they're able to benefit, if they're free to make decisions. After getting those, like, they were like a snapshot of what is happening in the society. Actually, by that time, I didn't have the idea that why can people do this or why cannot do this. For example, why can women do this and why cannot do this? That's the reason I went back to the focus group discussion. But our focus group discussion was also like supported by things that we call resource mapping and benefit analysis, particularly on the question of the benefit analysis. Instead of asking people asking direct, like, why cannot women do this? No, we didn't tell them that in society women cannot do this. They started by creating the attention that we are going to ask you some sensitive questions, but we don't want you to get scared that why are you asking me if I can buy cattle or I can buy clothes. So we started by okay, draw a map, show us what you own, the resources that you have in your society, then show us typical what kind of resources are used by men and what are used by women, what can women do, what can do, then also the benefits we have okay, they cultivate this and this. You have, for example, cotton, you have maize. Okay, who sells this in general in the household? Who makes decision on the little bit? Then they could just say that, okay, normally in your society, okay, men do this and women do this. So from there, we could at least get the graph. Well, when the person tells you something like, okay, in our culture, women can really not own cattle without telling her that we know that you are not allowed to own cattle. So that, no, this cattle, no, this is really typical many stuff. For us women, we cannot do. Then you ask them, okay, but why? Why cannot you do this? So we didn't go direct with your finding and tell them, listen, we have conducted this, no, we use like a trick to raise their attention, and then they gave us the answers themselves.
So, that's an insight that you got through your qualitative work. How would you advise somebody doing quantitative surveys to use those same tricks that you've used in your qualitative work to get to the right response? How could you use them in a quantitative survey to get the right response there too?
In the quantitative analysis?
In the quantitative survey, when you're asking the question, because there you do ask the question directly. You can't use your tricks that you just mentioned. So how would you be able to use those tricks in a quantitative survey?
I didn't think about that, but in quantitative survey, for me, I use a focus group discussion where people could, in quantitative survey, I think now somebody needs to get consent beforehand from the respondent that we are doing this survey because of this and this, and you are going maybe to ask some kind of questions that are, I think a researcher needs to explain the aim, because it's really difficult, especially going within the household when you collect intra-household data. And for example, husband here that you're asking the wife, like, can you really do this? Or can you not do this? Even for us, we got some problems because really we didn't collect, we collected data from each member individual. So we first had to ask the concept from the head of the household that we are going to collect data, but we are going to do it private with everybody. That when I collecting data from the wife, I want it to be me, only me, and some of them were reluctant, but my people in my house are not allowed to respond to any question without my presence. Then you have to tell them that, okay, we understand that, but these are normal things, and in development activities, there are some things that can be better answered by women themselves, for example, when you ask somebody about the condition of the children, their health, education, they can be better as responded by the women themselves. So we just want them to be open to tell them maybe what they need. We really use trick or how we can help them. Yeah, it's trick, especially in survey. But with qualitative studies, it can be easy because we can sit and observe what is going on, and you can get at least a snapshot of what is going on.
So it's a tricky business doing research. My second question relates to your chapter 7, where you decided to you used the livelihood approach, and you decided to focus on social and financial capital. And you mentioned that also human capital is part of it, but you're not going to analyze it. So I want to invite you now, if you would include human capital in your framework, in which way would you do it, and what kind of data would you collect in order to analyze it? What's the role of human capital in your chapter 7?
Yes, in chapter 7, human capital is not included. And since I mentioned that the reason that I did not include, when I was thinking about the human capital, in my mind I had education level and the skills. And from the descriptive analysis, I found that majority have this primary level of education, so there are really no big variation when it comes to education level. Majority have the primary level of education. I tried to make some tests and I could see that really it doesn't have a big impact, but I think I have included it maybe directly without mentioning it in chapter 8, when I say that pro-environmental behavior also affect the status of natural resources, and I also say that environmental behavior is affected by environmental awareness, whereby awareness is also the product of knowledge, which is also typically human capital.
But what about other human capital? Like, human capital is more than just formal education. What about the entrepreneurial spirit or the moral values a person has?
Yes, yeah.
Don't you think that those are important in that framework?
They're important.
And if so, how would you be able to include them if you would extend your study? That's
I think I could still have included as a part. Yeah, human capital, but I think maybe on the environmental knowledge, because the way I was reading it and the way it was defined, like knowledge is a product of, like you said, moral values, things like, not experience, but yeah, experience that people have been things that the way, when they grew up. But including like moral values.
Well, or think of entrepreneurship. If you're writing about which activities you choose, so presumably kind of the drive you have also influences the kind of activity you choose, separate from your formal education.
Like entrepreneurship.
That's one of the.
Not really also entrepreneurship, maybe also can be the background of the family.
Yeah.
Because entrepreneurship is really a skill, but it's not the skills that people gain from the formal education. Sometimes it's inherited from the family.
Psychosocial.
Yeah. Yeah, those are the things that I could have included, but unfortunately I didn't collect data on them. So it became almost impossible to include them during this period after the pre-defense. Yes, but I think I will consider them in my future studies.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This concludes the first round of questions. I've noted that these first rounds included questions on methods and generalizability of the research findings. But ILB mission statement doesn't only say that we should do sound research. The research should also be policy relevant. So I will allow a second round of policy relevant questions or questions inquiring about the policy relevance of your work. And I will start by giving the floor to Professor Stugan.
All right, so you are fully involved in the policy relevant development program by the VLIG, and this is the university cooperation between Zambia and several Flemish universities. And you have been confronted more than once with this question about what is the role of a member of Zambia University within the country itself, Tanzania? What can you do to influence actually the policymakers out there? And I wanted to say Dar es Salaam, but today we should say Dodoma, of course. Everybody's there now, Dodoma. And I'm not going to ask you about how hard it is to reach them as a researcher. This is a fact everywhere. It's not just in Tanzania. But I want to ask more, let's say that I'm not a policy specialist, I'm an anthropologist. I mean, to be honest, this is one thing that is a bit too far even for my expertise. But when I read your thesis, and it's maybe a little bit more on a theoretical level, but still about policy, you write in your conclusion that it's important to have a country's policy and clear implementation framework for the governance of water resources. And when I read it between the lines, I notice that you are saying one has to wait for the government to organize this. You're addressing the government, and my question is, in this way, it's an open question, are you opting for more centralization? Well, I thought that maybe your initial standpoint was that, and I can read that also between the lines in your thesis, is that decentralization is actually very important as a measure. But it could be that in one or two sentences you just destroy my question. It could be that I'm not understanding what decentralized and centralized is actually. So you're welcome to philosophize. No, not to reflect on this question.
Thank you, Professor Kure. Yes, I mentioned that it is important to have a clear government policy and implementation of framework the framework for the implementation of the policy. But that it doesn't mean that we need the centralized system, because policy is like a guideline, something that can show up the roadmap, what is supposed to be done. That's why even the policy itself, like I said, that it has moved to the government of water from the centralized system to decentralized system. Now, the country governance of fresh water has been divided into 9 river basins. So all the planning and the management activities are supposed to happen at the lower level of the basin. So the policy is just the guidelines that shows the direction, like the roadmap, what should be done, that people should participate, people should be included, but how do they participate? How are they included? That is not something that is really clear shown on the policy.
So in an ideal world or in an ideal Tanzania, you would actually opt for more decentralization?
I'll go for the more decentralization. Like I mentioned somewhere that the national resource programs themselves are diverse. They differ between areas. They are not the same. So when you have the decentralization policy and the resource program are clearly known, even the way people, because sometimes the implementation of policy fails, not because the policy is bad, but people are not really ready to change their habits from the systems from their comfort zone, the systems that they used, to the new system, like to the new rules and regulations, because prior to the policy, people had their own ways of accessing resources and even to manage them. So changing them abrupt like that, from now we are not supposed to have like this kind of system that like clan system, whatever things that you are used to do, now you are supposed to adhere to this policy, to do this. It's really not easy. Sometimes people who, of course, they will not say no, but they will still use their customs and everything to access the resources. So that's why I said that the decentralization policy is really important. Maybe to look at the way how we can mix the formal and the informal way, so as to have the clear implementation of the policy.
Okay. Professor De Weet, do you have a policy relevant question?
Yes, I have one related to table 26. Not that I expect you to know table 26, but this is the place where you show that there is a positive correlation that when between positive behavior towards conservation and having multiple development strategies, so having multiple, having a diversified portfolio of activities. I frame it like that as well. So my question is is one of endogeneity. Do you think there is do you think that this is really what do you think about the possibility that there might be some unobserved trait that is driving both your positive behavior towards conservation and having multiple activities, and that it's actually something unobserved that is driving both of them together and creating spurious correlation here? And that's not just an econometric or an academic exercise. The reason why I'm asking it now during the policy relevant round is because if it's true that diversification is the cause, really, the cause of pro-environmental behavior, then that means that a policy of the government that promotes diversification would actually help the environment as well. Whereas if that's not the case, if it's something unobserved that's driving both of them together, and think then again about these unobserved individual characteristics, like for example, how unobserved human capital traits, then promoting diversification will have no effect at all on environmental behavior. So how do you see that?
Yes, but there could be unobservable traits that could promote either of the two, maybe for environmental behavior itself or maybe diversification. I didn't test for the endogeneity, so right now I cannot say clear that there are these behaviors that affect this or they are not, but I agree that there could be some unobservable traits. For example, one of the findings, or the interesting findings that I got, like I think on the similar chapter, that women are less likely to practice those conservation methods or to have pro-environmental behavior. But at the same time, the results also show that people who have diversified are more likely to practice conservation behavior regardless of the gender. So on the other hand, women are less likely, but here, people who have diversified are more likely to practice regardless of the gender. So it means that if there are women, for example, who have been able to, because when we say that, for example, when women are not less likely to diversify, to practice conservation behavior, it's not because they are women. What I believe is because that there are some other factors behind. For example, in a study, it's obvious that already norms prevent them to practice activities that depend on river basin resources, so you don't expect them to be there. So they don't conserve because they're women, but also because of the cultural distribution of labor. So if we have the women, for example, who have managed to penetrate in the said main activities, and maybe to practice conservation behavior, can say that maybe there are other traits among this particular group of women, because they are not normal women in society, that my study has not, has not studied them. So there could be some other traits, even for the people with multiple activities. Maybe it's not only because of the access to financial or social capital or other factors. Maybe there are some other traits, like you said before, family background, entrepreneurship skills. Yeah, there could be. Unfortunately, my study that did not look at the indigenoid, but I think the future studies, these kinds of like a snapshot, but the future studies can consider including that, looking for the other attributes that can affect. I agree with you.
Okay, so thank you. I will now invite Professor Dazo to also raise a policy relevant question if she has any.
Only if there is. Only if there is time. Do we have time for a short?
Yeah, we have time for a short question. Go ahead.
For a brief question, it's. I was just mentioning before in my first questions, I was thinking about inclusion and inclusion about these in these user associations. But what is also very prominent in your thesis is the effect of native people versus people that came into the region. This must also be a quite tricky issue with regards to user associations and other policies towards improved resource use. Have you thought of such policies?
Could you repeat your question, please? Didn't get it right.
Sorry?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Oh, sorry. So, my question is with regards to specific policies that addresses the inclusion of people that are not native to the region into user groups, for example, or other institutions that govern the natural resources.
Okay. Actually, the policy does not speak about either the person is native or is not native to the area, but I think particularly in Colombia, whereby they have lots of migrants, the problem that they face is those areas traditionally were not used for activities like livestock keeping. So people, they move to the areas whereas the activities has not been practiced, they're not practiced, and there are no like infrastructure even willing to support them to form the groups or to have the area to conduct their activities. So we found out that most of the policies are geared to, or most of the implementation the implementation of the policies, like the plans that they have, they are geared towards the development of like irrigations and other activities that are traditional to that area, but not to the people who have moved or have migrated with different kind of activities. And the implication is more degradation of the resource. Yeah, because at the end of the day, when they don't have the area to conduct their activities, the best option for them is to invade like farmers area or other villages area, and they create more degradation. And I answered the question.
Yeah, I can get, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you to you both. So this ends the second round of questions. As you know, this is a public defense. This means that the audience can take part in the debate. So this is the point at which I ask whether there is a question or questions from the audience. No one wants to raise a question? Yes, else, go ahead.
When I was just recently in Tanzania, and we also discussed with people from the local government, how can you make sure that women come to information sessions, are included in these water user groups? And it was considered very hard, because typically it's the male household head being member of whatever you start. So do you have a policy recommendation on how to rectify that? And yeah.
Yes, I have a policy recommendation that I even think address. I mentioned it during my presentation that to make sure that different groups of people, not only women, that is like youth, yeah, because if the membership belongs to the head of household, it's not only women, and also the children and other household members who do not have access to that. And that is one of the things that I have also found out when I was conducting my research, that I think we need like different practitioners who are involving in the implementation of the policy to look at the way to involve different people, not only women, different groups of people in the implementation policy. Because, okay, the membership to the group most of the time belongs to the heads of the household, not really because they are men, I can say, or because some of the heads of the household are also women. But most of the group, first of all, being the membership of the group that is based on trust and something like that. So it's easy to invite somebody who, for example, is married, because there's assurance that the person will not move. It's easier to involve the person who owns different assets, you know, that this one cannot migrate and leave the cattle and the farm here. But for somebody who does not possess anything, who may be single, for example, that is not a factor, but there are other factors that people can build the trust that this person, he is here, has this and this and this and this, that it's easy to involve them. So even for the women, I think that also access to different resources can be the factor. Instead of saying that, okay, we want you to be involved, maybe these women should be supported in other ways that can be accepted in those groups, rather than just being the women.
And so you're satisfied with that answer?
Yeah, it's one way.
Okay, so then I invite the jury to withdraw for deliberation.
They are now decisions when they come back and you say that you go after
So guys, you can just the copies of the thesis.
Yeah.
More useful for you guys.
Can I just come myself?
Thanks.
Thank you for making this one. And that you
You gonna do PhD? Yeah? Yes. I'm not sure yet, but which
So, dear Christina, the jury has deliberated, and after a long and hard deliberation, they have come to the conclusion that you performed well on the relatively difficult part of this defense. This means that I can congratulate you. Congratulations. You are awarded with the title of Doctor in Development Studies at the University of Antwerp. Before making this official, I have to read a text that you will not understand. Here we go. Ondergetekenden bevestigen dat Christina Shitiima met goed gevolg de doctoraatsopleiding heeft voltooid en dat zijn proefschrift heeft verdedigd waarbij al de wettelijke voorschriften van openbaarheid en reglementen op de toekenning van de academische graden werden geëerbiedigd. Na beraadslaging beslist de jury om aan Christina Shitiima de titel van doctor in de ontwikkelingsstudies toe te kennen. I will now invite the supervisors to give the laudatio, and I first ask Dr. Dimoso to take it away.
Dear audience present, I first start with a word for congratulations to the new doctor. And at home, we have a way of addressing a person who acquires a new title. Normally talk slowly. And when it comes to her name or his name, you pronounce very, very slowly. So bear with me that I congratulate you, Dr. Christina Shitiima. You are a newly acquired title, and so when you talk slowly, it sticks in your head. And that she is having a new prefix, doctor. Otherwise, somebody may call you doctor afterwards, and you may not know that it is you that were the So, congratulations, new Dr. Christina Shitiima. And all people here around really join with me in extending their congratulations to you for this achievement. I know here we have my colleague in supervision, that's Professor Dr. Natalia, but also we have a member of the faculty, we have management of minerals, the Belgium wing. You have our colleagues in studies, but also have the jury members who really have contributed a lot to making the document much better, and that qualifies it to be called a doctor in development studies. Please allow me to quote a few sentences from your dissertation, and this is in the acknowledgement, where you said, because of my interest in quantitative research methods, I was highly motivated to apply rigorous quantitative methods in my research. Soon after commencement of my studies, I immediately realized that things were not straightforward as expected. I was introduced to the new theoretical approaches, and you mentioned these approaches. All these required me to think beyond the household analysis, and therefore you had to look for other methodologies and theories which at the end would require to know much more about the intra-household analysis as well. And that's what you did. When I was reading this acknowledgement, especially these words, it came to my mind that really now you have understood what being a doctor is. So when you are schooling for a doctorate, it's not that you are coming with your 50 years, thinking that doctorate is just make analysis for 50 years, and later on coming to preconceived conclusions. That's not doctorate. Doctorate is to venture into new insights. And later on, you come up with something that you contribute to the existing body of knowledge. For that case, there is no room for 50 years. You can have that at the beginning, but when you come to the middle and to the end, your 50 years should evaporate. Should evaporate. So there is no way that you can come to preconceived conclusions. So the way we tried to mentor you all these years, 4 years, was actually to make you an independent and original thinker in a way that will come up with new insights like what you did. Once again, congratulations. I remember this. This is a story of about 5 years back. She came to my office. By then, I was a director for research, publications, and postgraduate studies at Christina University. So she came to my office asking for a recommendation letter to present it to University of Antwerp, I think. And I remember the words which I wrote in that letter 5 years back. And let me quote the words. And later we go to check whether the words are correct or not. I wrote this. So this is just coming from my mind, but that's what I remember to have written. I said, I have known Christina Shitiima as a hardworking, social, inquisitive, and interactive individual. I'm impressed with her abilities and interest in research. I believe that even at the PhD level, where research is mandatory, Christina will perform well and accomplish her studies within the scheduled time. Scheduled time was 4 years, and today is exactly 4 years. Exactly 4 years. So you have lived my words, and that makes me proud. That really, I recommended something which I knew she would do, and she did. Thank you so much. Now that you have done your work, and for us scholars, we are saying, for these 4 years, you were schooling for PhD. Schooling for PhD. Meaning that you had to do a lot of readings, listening to the public, to the mentors, to other people who have gone before you through this work, and trying to digest what they've been telling you, what books have been telling you, what theories have been directing you, and then coming up with some insights of your own. It's really a very challenging work. And in due course of time, you may find yourself that is that the way I wanted it to pursue? Is this the way I wanted to go? And then, including myself, when I was calling for my PhD, you come to this juncture. Is this really what I wanted to do? Because now, you don't have your fixed ideas anymore. You don't have your preconceived notions anymore. Now you are somewhere, and then you try to judge yourself. Now, is this really what I want to do? And sometimes you might have already gone away from your first direction. Maybe you are now somewhere in another direction. This happens. But again, apart from these things or challenges that are coming in, but also you may be facing other social challenges. Being in a foreign country, encountering a different culture, a different social means of communication. I'm not talking of medium of instruction because it's English, but you have other social ways of interactions. Yeah, talking Dutch maybe a bit. You talk Dutch, no? But you have few words in Dutch. At least ask you for what. So these are the challenges that a person, especially someone who's coming from outside our own country, may face. The good thing with that, of we thank God for that, is that you are more exposed to the world. More exposed to the world. You know different culture. You know how people interact somewhere apart from your own country, and so you are privileged. You can't now compare yourself with your colleague who might have graduated today, because today at home you have graduation. and we have some people who are graduating with their PhDs. But they have graduated at their home university. And you are graduating in another university abroad, for which you are so much exposed to the world. And your wild connections are improved compared to the one who is schooling at home. So these are the challenges, but the challenges which make you mature, make you improved person, and actually international figure. So all these, when you are concluding your studies here, you should be proud of that. And we mentors, myself and my colleague, Professor Dr. Nathaniel, we are really proud and happy of that. The thing is, I say there's a difference between schooling for PhD, of which we encounter all these challenges, and living. Now we have a presentation here, answering questions from these gurus here, and the others listening from Skype and responding to what she was talking. All these are actually making an end PhD. The issue here is leaving your PhD. It's actually waiting for a PhD. To make people that this person is really having a doctorate in development policy. We want to see that. And that's now in the field. So welcome to the field. Welcome to the field. I hope, as I said 5 years back, that you are capable. So also, working for PhD, showing that you are able and that you really deserve for that PhD, I think again, you are able. And this will be analyzed 4 years later. for 4 years later, when you become a senior lecturer, and later associate professor and full professor. Because that will be done through promotions, of which you have to do research and publish. So this is waiting for a PhD. You have a PhD, now you revert with attitude, you revert the people that what really I was awarded at the University of Antwerp, I deserved it, and now see, I'm professor. So please, if not work for your PhD. I conclude my speech by saying that Mzumbe University as an organization, you are part of it. You can't remove University of Antwerp in your history of lifetime. You cannot. So now you join the body of alumni of University of Antwerp, of which you have contributed. You have to pay back to this university. You pay back in several ways, not through money, but when you publish, the university actually is very proud of you. But a colleague or a person or a scholar was finished and being awarded a PhD, and then doesn't hear anything from her for the rest of her life. That would be a disaster in academia. That would be a disaster. So you join the big community of University of Antwerp, for which you have to bring back the rewards of their treatment here. And this is through your promotion, through publication, whatever. Once again, thank you so much. I'm happy, I'm proud of you. And after this speech, when I go back and have access to my computer and to the internet, I flash back. I put this on air that Mzumbe knows today, this very night, you are new doctor from Mzumbe University, graduating at the University of Antwerp. Congratulations, thank you so much, all of you.
Dr. Christina Shitiima. Let me also congratulate you with your PhD. It has been a long journey, which started about 4 years ago, and it has come to a good end today. This is also the moment to look back in time. I clearly remember when we met for the first time, and I'm almost sure you will also remember that moment. You had responded to a call, as Professor Di Moto already mentioned, to a call for PhD proposals that was launched in the framework of the GRADE program. And you were among the 6 candidates that proposal, and you immediately impressed the jury because of the conceptual clarity of your proposal and the ideas you have about research design and methodology. I must say, after you had left the room, not much discussion was needed about whom we would grant the scholarship, and it's clear that jury made the right choice. After a first successful year of doctoral program with coursework and exams, the proposal was further refined, and a first doctoral paper was elaborated. Most of the people in the room here, well, the younger people, they will acknowledge that presentation of a doctoral paper is really a stressful moment at IUB. But you managed to do that with flying colors. In fact, you even showed you could handle a little bit more stress when you also volunteered to present in front of Melissa Leach, which is one of the doctors honoris causa of the University of Antwerp. And also that you did very well. Back home, you were supervised by Professor Mozo, and your fieldwork took off. This was really a huge undertaking, with data collection in several phases, with different research assistants and at different locations. So you were confronted with many challenges, some of which were very closely the topic of your PhD: the changing climate conditions, the difficulties in interviewing some of the interviewees because of their position in the household. Throughout the fieldwork and the data analysis, the complexity of the topic unfolded, and intersectionality became a keyword of your PhD. You also realized that only focusing on quantitative methods would not do, and you started appreciating the value added of qualitative methods, even to that level that you entered into discussions with Professor Kuhn about Shitiima culture. Back in Antwerp, I can testify, also for your husband, that you work as hell. Often saying no to invitations for parties, having only one small guilty pleasure, as far as I know, and that was shopping on the net. So no matter what you were doing, one constant element throughout the different phases was your discipline, working hard to respect deadlines, taking into account feedback, reworking drafts several times if necessary. And so all this together makes that we are here today to celebrate the finalization of a period which was challenging but also enriching. I'm quite confident that your PhD will not only benefit yourself, but also several other actors and people on the ground. I think we can safely say that this will be a PhD with outreach and impact, something which is high on IOB's agenda. So Christina, let me wish you all the best, both in your private and personal life. This sounds like a goodbye, but it isn't, because we will be collaborating further in the near future, and I'm really looking forward to this. I know you are returning to Tanzania next Monday, but I hope you still have some time tomorrow to enjoy your guilty pleasure one more time at your favorite shop, and if not, you can also use my small gift when you're coming back early next year.
Nog eens voor de foto, Nathalie. Okay, so I thank both promoters for the laudatio. Don't know whether Christina herself prepared a small word.
Yes, maybe small.
A very small one? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, everybody. for attending my presentation. I'd like to thank everybody, my special thanks to my promoters, Professor Natalie and Dr. Limoso, for guiding me with passion, even the time that I could not meet the deadlines and what really. Yeah, I like your way of coaching me, the way you let me be free, explore new ideas, methodology, but we'd always make sure that I don't go beyond boundaries. I remember Professor Natalie telling me that please make sure that those comments that people are giving you, try to look for them before making a decision. You may end up doing this PhD for 6 years. So I thank you for everything. Right? I'm looking forward to continue working with you, Professor Natalie and Dr. Limoso. I would like to thank the members of the jury for constructive comments, criticism during the pre-defense. Actually, it was one of the difficult days at AUB, but I thank you because I ended up with a good piece of work. Really, the comments from the pre-defense helped me to improve my book, and I promise to incorporate some of them on my next publication, especially the comments from Dr. Joaquin on the diversification and everything. The chapters were not published during my publication. I'll make sure to include most of the comments. If there is any other mistake in my book, those remain my mistakes, not everybody's mistake. My sponsor is not here, during yours, the government of Belgium. I would like to acknowledge for sponsoring me, start funding my study. Here in Belgium, even when in Tanzania, when I was conducting the research, I received funds from the government of Belgium. I'm really grateful, and I'm glad that I ended up with getting my PhD, so there is no loss of funds. IOB staff, thank you to all of you. It was a great. I mean, everybody at IOB, but particularly the administrative staff, I think, they really make our life easier for us PhD students. I think also my colleagues will say the same. When it comes looking for the house, for the visa, permit, reading the letters that are written in Dutch, and everything. That's everything that. And I cannot mention all of them, but everybody has his or her own special way in my life. And my fellow PhD students that we've been together for past 4 years, and since some are next to graduate, I saw Frederick called for PhD proposal today. So maybe after Frederick, the rest will also graduate. I'm praying for you. Praying for you. Yeah. Thanks to all of you, the other colleagues that we were together during the informal meeting with our promoter, our mentor, as Sarah, Lisa, Dimitri, Patricia has already graduated. Yeah, it was a good time to exchange ideas during those meetings. My brothers from Africa that we live in the same compound, I can see you are here. Ivan, Sahawan, Christian. These people have been taking good care of me, sometimes inviting me to dinner when they thought that I was studying too much. Thanks a lot. But sometimes to exchange, our works, our research and everything. Christian, thank you for helping me, especially after the pre-defense, to edit the book so that the date looks good. Yeah, thanks a lot. Actually, before that, the table we are looking like everything was that. He helped me a lot with the technology and everything. Yeah, and to everybody, the fellow master students, my neighbors, I can see they are here, my colleagues, thank you. Coming back to my home institution, I would like to mention my university, Mzumbe University, for granting me the permit and study leave to be here. I'm glad I not let them down. Colleagues are not here if they can hear me from the Faculty of Social Sciences, Department of Economics. I have special friends there. Mosali, Jennifer, Robert, Otto, Annie. And all of them, thank you for the support. Also, yeah, my family. My parents are not here, but I'm not sure if they are watching. I ordered the live stream so that my father and mother could watch. I'm not sure if they're, but Mama and Baba, Mommy and Daddy, if you're watching me, I love you. Whatever I have achieved today could have not been possible without your support and everything you have done since when I was a child. I really know I'm coming from the normal family, so life has not always been easy to us, but today here I am. My husband is here. I'm so sick. Being here means a lot to me. Julian, that lady is my friend. We did the masters together. I think the habit that I go to shopping, she was the one. Thank you for coming in. That means a lot. My children are not watching, they are at school. They are one of the people who endure this journey with me, even without mother, the household just it has not been possible. My friends, some of them, I don't know if they're watching, who have been taking good care of my family, holding my kids, being there for the birthday, for the graduation, those kind of stuff that I really missed when I was here. But I have special friends who have always been there for me when I was not there. Thank you to everybody. Yeah. Yeah, my friends, if I can mention Elisa or Marani, I don't know if you are watching. But thank you to everybody. And I think that's all.
Okay, so after these beautiful speeches, I think I can invite you to a reception that takes place, Kathleen, over there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.